Hello, this is Patrick from the Fundamental Principle Podcast. I'm here with Jerome. We're going to do an
Hey,
audio
Patrick, how's it
reading.
going?
Pretty good, sir. We're going to do an audio reading. Jerome's going to read for us. I do want to open with a prayer first.
Yes,
and then
please.
We'll get to the, in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Soul of Christ, sanctify us. Body of Christ, save us. Blood of Christ, inebriate us. Water from the side of Christ, wash us.
Yes. Passion of Christ, strengthen us. Oh, good Jesus, hear us.
Within the wounds, hide us, suffer us not to be separated from thee. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much, Patrick. So first up on the docket today, we're going to be doing a lot of these. Both Patrick and I are fans of Pete Quinones, and Pete does a lot of reading. But we're going to be providing reading and commentary on Catholic and Identarian by Julien Langella, published by Arctos. If you can, pick up a hard copy, because we never know how often this stuff sort of going to get disappeared from the internet. But we're gonna read it and discuss it. So Patrick, whenever you want me to stop, just interrupt me and let me know. But this is published in 2020 by Julien Langella and translated by, doesn't say here, but Mr. Langella, to give you a brief biography here, has been a long-time Identitarian activist. He co-founded Generation Identitarian France in 2011 and is currently the president of Academia Christiana, a Catholic association that aims to prepare young Catholics for activism in all its forms, but especially the political. Julien is 32 years old and a father of 3 children. He lives in France. So,
I didn't see it on Arctos anymore. They might have removed it, or they you might do some digging. I found it online and other sources, hardback and paper copy. But I didn't see it on Arctos.
Well, get a copy if you can. But from the beginning of the book here, the cross, which has been planted for 13 centuries in a Christian land, this cross representing the Catholic faith, with her institutions, her customs, her families, her churches, her schools, this cross will be defended and saved only when you defend it, the land that supports it, by Dom Girard. The dedication to my sons, Catholic and Provençal. The translator's forward. It has been a privilege to translate Julien Langella's work, Catholics et Identitaires, while several French authors are tackling the question of French and European identity, which is ultimately at stake in the present moment, and the importance of guarding that identity. Mr. Langella's work is unique that it approaches the question from the perspective of a faithful Catholic Frenchman. It was this aspect of his book that first struck me, because this perspective is not usually found in nationalist or right-wing works, at least not in English. His approach will certainly interest the more mainstream nationalist right and the dissident right in the United States, as well as the English-speaking world in general. In the work that follows, the reader will find not only there are strong Christian arguments in favor of nationalist politics, but also there are strong Christian arguments in favor of guarding human culture and the natural tribal inclinations of human culture, as well as such. For we, being made in the image and likeness of God, were fashioned according to His wisdom, not our own. Our biology and physical makeup, our temperament, our race, our ethnicity, all play a role in our identity, and they're not simply fads that we might pick and choose. Thus, we cannot discard or ignore them without consequences. While the author's approach to this identitarian question is uniquely Catholic, for which will, of course, immediately resonate with American Catholic conservatives, Christians of any hue who care about the intersection of faith and culture will learn from this work. The author's vision, to reconquer, to regain homeland in society, is a vision shared by many Europeans. European man and his civilization currently face difficult and existential questions, and so a sense of urgency is needed for our people if we are to be tackled this dilemma. We will be both challenged and encouraged by Langella. A few notes on the translation. I have approached this translation with the religious American conservative in mind. All biblical quotations, instead of being translated from French, have been directly cited using the New Oxford Annotated Bible with Apocrypha, Expanded Edition, Revised Standard Version, Oxford University Press, 1973 and 77. I have provided scriptural references, chapter and verse, for all biblical quotations. These, as well as other doctrinal texts from the Catholic tradition, have also been italicized to facilitate their quick reference. The right-wing political party, for most of its history as Front National, National Front, currently led by Marine Le Pen, changed its name in 2018 to Rassemblement National, National Rally, because Catholic and Identarian, published in French in 2017, used Front National throughout, and because most American readers who are familiar with right-wing politics in France will more easily recognize the older name, I have chosen to leave the author's references to this party as Front National. This work includes references to La Manif pour tous, Protest for Everyone, a group of associations organized in 2012 that protested, with great participation, a gay marriage bill that had been proposed in France. La Manif pour tous has since expanded its area of interest to include traditional family issues more broadly. When the author refers to La République or Les Républicains, he is most often referring to the leaders and supporters of the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799, and their later disciples. American readers may not necessarily be familiar with the atrocities committed by the revolutionary government in France or its brutal suppression of Catholic and nationalist resistance. The author sees much of French secularism and the decline in French culture and civilization as an extension of that revolution. The reader is invited to bear in mind that the term Republican does not refer to the conservative politics as it generally does in the United States. The French work contains references in French to sources originally written in English, which are sometimes quoted at length. Instead of providing retranslations, I have sought to quote directly from the English language sources whenever this was possible. In a few instances, the English original was very difficult to track down, so I translated from the French. I want to thank the team at Arctos for partnering with me to bring this work to fruition. A successful translation is the fruit of many people: author, translator, proofreader, editor, publisher, etc. So a big thanks to everyone involved. Jason Rogers. Preface by M. Abbott, Guillaume of Tenourion. This new man who doesn't exist. There is no man in the world I have seen in my life, Frenchmen, Italians, Russians, etc. I even know, thanks to Montesquieu, one can be a Persian. But as for man, I declare that I have never met him in my life. If he exists, I know nothing of it. Joseph de Maistre. Considerations sur la France. Julien Langella's book courageously opens a way to reflect freshly on the origin of the social bond and therefore on the crisis of belonging, through which so many people appear to have misplaced their identity. There is no institutional crisis, no financial crisis, but the situation is serious. The crisis that we face is a moral crisis, and because of its rootedness, because of what it is at stake, is the identity of each of us, one can say that deep down it is also a spiritual crisis. For St. Thomas Aquinas, the first aim of the law is to create the possibility among citizens of true political friendship. This friendship among the citizens of the same political community is not reduced to a simple let's get along. It must be characterized as a genuine, quote, living with, convictus in Latin, the other. This does not mean that the foreigner that one tolerates will more or less charitably, simply so that one can say one is not racist or homophobic or misogynist or anti-Semitic or anti-Christian. This term is one of qualitative relationship, again referring to St. Thomas Aquinas, which includes at a minimum an element of friendliness, a fundamental kindness which is not affected. It is a peculiar preference because it is never chosen, but rather is born and affirmed spontaneously between fellow citizens who experience true brotherhood in that way. Footnote 2. At the heart of any social life, there's a form of love that becomes more valuable the more it is practiced unconditionally towards fellow citizens or fellow countrymen.
Yes. So,
go ahead.
Sorry for cutting you off. No, I think this is kind of a real big point with the living together is like there's a lot of divisiveness in the tradcath space, especially on Twitter and other places. But it's I think we need to put, as long as we are, let me know your thoughts on this. But it's we need more emphasis on the living together with other Catholics. There's a lot of regular folks that go to the Novus Ordo, that just aren't aware of like Vatican II and the follies of Vatican II, but are decent moral folks and just have bad.
Right. There are many people who wish to be Catholic who don't know any better, who follow the Church's teaching on their families and don't contracept and don't understand the ambiguities with like Nostra Aetate, for instance. Not because they're ignorant, but not out of any sense of malice or malicious ignorance or deliberate ignorance. They just haven't been taught by their priests and bishops. And I believe that they want to follow what Church teaches and teach what the Church believes to their children. They've just been mistaken in what that means. And there are many young men out there in the world, especially young men, but young people generally. And this is purely me, Jerome, talking. There are millions and millions of young people who would be Catholic, but for the disgusting acts of the hierarchy convincing them that in order to become Catholic, they must believe that up is down, that black is white, that 1 and 1 is 3. And, of course, none of those things are true. In fact, Catholicism is the one true faith that shouts most loudly that 1 and 1 is 2, in my opinion, and that it is this distortion of the teaching and the distortion of what it means to be Catholic that this book addresses that is most urgently needed addressing. So, if I know you have a copy, Patrick, if you want to take over for me at any particular time, go ahead. But let me finish here. Continuing, fellow countrymen. Those to whom one will always open his door. Or at the heart of any social life, there is a form of love that becomes more valuable the more it is practiced unconditionally toward fellow citizens or fellow countrymen, those to whom one will always open his door. This is what the angelic doctor of the Church calls the pacem sociale in his work De Regno ad Regnum Crypti. This concerning the mind's working towards a common good, which is specifically theirs. The natural opening of the heart, which is to say the beauty of the social bond, is explained, again according to St. Thomas, by a form of communicatio, the most adequate way to translate this enigmatic term, which is itself a translation into Latin of the Greek word, I can't even begin to pronounce it, would be the word sharing. Communicatio is a spontaneous...
Well, that'd be a Greek word,
yeah. Is a spontaneous sharing between fellow countrymen, between fellow citizens. It does not mean that a society worthy of the name private property would no longer exist, or that all goods would be held in common. It is clear that from the Thomist perspective, which is that of our author, property is a natural right possessed by everyone. Society, however, any society, is based on a sharing, or on what President Emmanuel Macron himself said in his first speech to Congress in the State of France in July 2017, called, quote, a common good. This is why Catholics can't be libertarians, because libertarians deny the idea that a common good exists. They're only private.
That and the concept of like living together. Like if you're under social contract, then you can't have that agape love.
Right. It's forced.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I'll read for a little bit.
Sure.
Let us mention, by the way, that this communicato between citizens of the same country is so strong because it is founded not on individuals who are magically stuck together, but on families who, in the Christian model of society, prevail in the West, presented a union of two sexes in one flesh, according to the law of love. Cardinal Casper, in his book on the gospel of the family, has a wonderful remark on general politics. Even when an individual chooses to remain single, the family remains, so to speak, his existential horizon, the fundamental community in which all of his social relationships are rooted, from the closest, most immediate relationships to his most distant ones. do we not speak of the human family, but the eternity of men living in the world? If civilian friendship is from the common good, is because the family, this miniature society, has saturated all of our relationships in mutual love from the beginning. What is social love? It is the common love to us all, leading us together to show to fellow citizens that they may belong to the same family. Gilliam Golphin lays the question out of civility as a new freshness, but in a very Aristotelian way. Aristotelian way. In Sauvature, I'm not. French is not.
Politique. By opposing all the theories of sovereignty to this policy of the common good, going back before Christianity to Aristotle. So this is again one of the modern areas of liberalism, that somehow man, like Rawlsian liberalism, is this notion that man, comes into the world with no bonds, right? That you're not baptized into a faith or raised in a family or from a region, right? And this is one of the great evils of the modernists, is that all men aren't from families who are born and speaking certain languages and attending certain practice at mass and celebrating certain feast days more than others. Patrick, you and I are both mixed. So St. Patrick's Day is more important to us than St. Joseph's Day. And it would be ridiculous of us to insist that Italians or Portuguese who rightfully revere St. Joseph celebrate St. Patrick with equal,
fervor.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, and that's just one of those things that, right? Men are born into families that speak languages, and in particular places, we've talked about our homes privately, and there's places that you've talked about that are just the most important place in the world to you. They're not as important to me. They're important to me because they're important to you, because you're my friend. But I can't love your home the way you love it, and you can't, vice versa. You can't love my home the way I love it. So I can care about France as a white person, as a Christian, because France is the eldest daughter of the church, and it pains my heart to see like Notre Dame burned. But I can't love it the way a boy.
I have that ethnic tie to it. To like, it's different being a Parisian, and
right, yeah, I didn't grow up.
Midwest boy, yeah.
Yeah, I didn't grow up hearing its bells and going to mass there and serving at the altar there, and seeing, it wasn't part of my life. Now I can love it, and I should love it. Every Christian, every white person should love Notre Dame, because it is Our Lady's, and you should love Our Lady, and you should love the beautiful things that. And I love France. I love France the way I love members of my own family, because it is this glorious jewel in the crown of Christendom. But I'm not a Frenchman, and so the abbot here makes a wonderful point of like, each man is born into a family, a particular family, in a particular place, and this tradition goes back all the way 2,500 years to the beginning of Western philosophy, to Aristotle and Plato, and those who deny it are the weirdos. So, if you'd continue, sir.
What is the common good? Since it manifests a common belonging, it is shared as it increases. Who hasn't seen some old French film from the 50s or 60s in which the conviviality. Conviviality. Excuse me. This obvious community, which one finds in an organic society where political friendship abounds, can be seen in action. We might add that even if society were a group of bandits, the common good would remain at the heart of the group. It is absolutely forbidden to betray the values that constitute the group, and because it is an all-encompassing, that this sharing is not just material. Above all, it is sharing the same morals, the same concept of justice, the same values, the same way of speaking, even the same words to designate these values, the same judgments, the same culture, and finally it implies the same identity. It has become fashionable in the media to question identity, to stigmatize the attachment to soil and traditions. It is almost as if any prior spiritual wealth, anything greater than the individual, has become suspicious or has transformed into some new bizarre metaphysical paradigm. However, why is the identity irreplaceable, and why at the same time is it so difficult to identify the point that it seems sometimes easier to deny than to define? The identity, village or neighborhood, region, national, continent, civilization, human, is always both universal and specific. Identity is universal because, unlike material goods, which are objects of private property, identity is fully shareable, or at least if the other wants to share it. But at the same time, identity is specific because it always presents itself as a self-evident fact, some inherited, referring to a community, upbringing, and destiny. We can say that it is in this perspective that Julien Langella envisions his book Catholic and Identarian. For him, it is not a question of reducing identity to Catholicism, but rather showing that Catholicism, the religion of the world incarnate, the Word incarnate, the religion of the specific within the universal, and the universal within the specific, has always been an extraordinary matrix of cultures reshaping human identity, illuminated or historical transfigured by the mystery of God become man. I do want to make a point. There are certain communities within the trad space that wish to reject every modernist thing. I don't want to put this charitably. That they want to deny everything that's not Catholic. So it is, and that to deny the ethnicity, to deny anybody can become Catholic, anybody can come here, change, become Catholic. It doesn't matter if you're Haitian, it doesn't matter if you're Mexican or you're white. As long as you're Catholic, you can get along to get along. And that's never been the case. That is historically, it is ahistorical. And I think that is something that should be got away from. It might be a cause of mixed families, of mixed race families, but that is, we can't have an agape. Sorry, go ahead.
No, please finish your thought.
I think we can't build this agape if we don't have, as he says, that we need to have this, like the village, the neighbor, the tribal sense of who's the in-group versus the out-group. And that is maybe far more, again, this, as it says earlier, it's easier to deny than it is to define.
Yeah, well, and to deny, right, Catholicism is necessary but not sufficient. And, Frenchmen, 1,000 years ago, Swedes and Italians were both Catholic. And yet Swedes and Italians wouldn't necessarily get along just because they're very different people. And this denial of the reality of ethnos, this denial of the reality of identity, drives many men away from the church, because they're effectively, when you deny identity, you're asking people to commit cultural suicide. If everyone can be an American, then being an American means nothing. And you're asking me to destroy myself if I say that, well, as long as they love the Constitution and barbecue, anyone in the world can come here and be an American. Like, that's ridiculous. It's not true. So, I would be, the abbot is very wise here in insisting on particulars. But if you would continue, Patrick.
Then I think we need to talk after I have a note after this paragraph. Media thinking, which is all too often the only one with the right to be heard in our cities and even in our countryside, no longer understands uh, that this is because for a long time thought of the common good, which marvels at the civilization of love, is no longer taught or transmitted. Society today sees itself as an aggregate of the individual who, above all, must avoid mutual inconveniencing one another, but who do not know, or rather often do not want to know, that is good, that which is good in their intentions and that which is not. The famous formula of organized chaos under the banner of Fourierism is so well known that one cannot dream of questioning it. Your freedom stops where the freedom of others begins, and your freedom goes only to as far as the good that it is able to accomplish, because it must guard itself from the evil that it may cause. But your
Amen.
freedom encounters. Sorry.
But this is profound, and we could talk. This is a couplet worthy of a book of its own. So, yeah. But your freedom encounters no other limit, no other boundary than the liberty of others in a world where none, neither good nor evil, has the slightest meaning, because at any rate, one, quote, one cannot know, and one doesn't want to know if there may be, in fact, objective norms and absolute rules. There is no longer a positive absolute in our societies, and so we struggle to understand there might be something bad that isn't necessarily absolute evil. The taboo that demonizes those who get too close to our societies decree that such and such is a radical evil, Nazism, racism. But they fail to recognize the evil which may simply be said has no value in the sense of Plato's Gorgias, a culture that no longer knows how to identify evil, which does not recognize non-values, is a polluted culture, a toxic culture, which Pope John Paul II called a culture of death. This European nihilism, as Nietzsche said, leads to a religion of nothingness, that which can belong to no identity, because in nothingness, even identities fade to the point of disappearing. In nothingness, anything can be worth anything, precisely because nothing is no longer worth anything. The defense of this very necessary quest for identity is what Julien Langella has delivered in this book. Everyone, I think, can understand and make this somewhat scholastic defense of identity. It is nothing other than the defense of humanity's spiritual heritage, inheritances that are only transmitted through what Simone Weil called rootedness, heritage that becomes lost or goes astray in being uprooted. Why do we speak of identity? Because identity is inherited. It cannot be decreed. It does not change in the course of a generation. It is a spiritual inheritance that a child finds at birth and which is developed through the child's relationship with his father and mother. The littleness of man is marked not only by his nature but by his birth. It is not for nothing that astrologers throughout history long considered the time and place of birth to mark the origin of one's destiny. I am thinking of the great astrologers of the Renaissance, or even a scrupulous Catholic theologian like Cajetan. It wasn't about conjuring up some sort of pre-programming that includes a natural predestination of beings. It was simply that these astrologers believed that human freedom was conditioned by a number of facts more ancient than freedom, outside of which this freedom could not assert itself. Freedom always has to work within these bounds. Among the facts that condition individuals' ethnic origin has its place, not in order to impose some need, but rather as one of the conditions of birth for the human animal. It would be absurd to deny humanity's various conditions, as it does the empty idea of a totally undifferentiated humanity which some adhere to. There's obviously exist different ethnic origins. Miscegenation is one possible origin, often rich in qualities that the individual receives from both parents, but more complicated to live because the mixed-race person cannot totally claim either community. He is somewhat like an origin unto himself. He will have to accept it. His success often comes precisely from this proud and ardent acceptance. Julien Langella does not condemn the mixed-race person. He doesn't suggest that denying them existence would be monstrous. He exclusively confronts the ideology of miscegenation, which one could just as easily call progressive anti-cultural bias. In this regard, it is important to distinguish, on the one hand, the phenomenon of cultural intermixing, a fact of life. We can all see from the internet offers today the positive, purely virtual of easier exchange from one part of the world to another. And on the other, The ideology of mandatory miscegenation, which includes the infatuation with quotas and the compulsive glorification of diversity on the, quote, American model, for which one can carefully fails to set limits, ignore in particular the violence it often entails. The phenomenon of cultural intermixing undeniably brings some enrichment. We are, like it or not, a culture of choice, and choice is beautiful. Here's an example. Formerly, marriage was a routine act around which society imposed certain boundaries. Today, marriage, which now concerns young people in their 30s, is a personal choice and accepted as such. Our culture now requires that we make a choice, and our identity sometimes finds itself modified. Some person may be both Catholic and Breton origins and will still choose to identify as a Corsican, forgetting Brittany, or the other way around. These choices in themselves carry an interior richness. Nevertheless, we have to be careful with these kinds of choices, which are often superficial, a kind of Western tourism, for example, which wants to discover different cultures but leads disconnected individuals to the same 5-star hotels around the world. You could make the same remark about fashion, also stereotyped by the globalized brands. Cultural intermixing constantly puts us in danger of superficiality. Concerning mandatory anti-cultural progressivism and Western restlessness, this idea that one should always, quote, be on the move, never staying put because we have to think like nomads, this represents more than just a passage or an academic idea. It is a militant ideology, having left the universality of human nature to dictate the idea of man, proclaims a priori the futility of any stabilizing anchor in the realm of the specific. The ideology of miscegenation is this: a declaration of uniformity and the suppression of diversity. Julien Langella exposes the contradictory character of this ideology. He explains, quote, we cannot recognize the malicious and bellicose nature of this project of mandatory miscegenation through its contradictions. The partisans of miscegenation have but one word in their mouth: diversity. But these two totally incompatible things. Words have meanings. Miscegenation is fusion, the act of passing which is plural to which is singular from difference to sameness. Miscegenation does not enrich, it impoverishes. Unquote. It is the suppression of any real diversity. We see this contradiction a sign of weakness, and we are therefore encouraged to act and fight. You must not convince yourselves that the fate of the West is written in stone and that its undifferentiated society is the future of the world. The ideology of globalism, as all ideologies, will one day explode like a bubble in response to the urgency of natural politics. The law of societies, those which define what we earlier called political friendship, are eternal. They will inevitably unfold one way or another, apparently sooner rather than later. This is why it's so important that there be free minds like Julien Langella who now anticipate the real future, after having shown the lie of the glorious fake future that the ideology attempts to worm up before extinguishing into a general discredit, and whose premises it is possible, as of today, to perceive. Abbot G. de Tenorion. Author's word concerning the footnotes. Unlike those in the preface, the footnotes contained in this book only give the precise source for the information used by the author. No commentary accompanies them. Introduction. The state of things and the challenges to take up. The face of Europe is changing. It's no secret to anyone, Catholicism is on the decline in France. In the 1960s, 96% of the French described themselves as Catholic and baptized, and at least one half were practicing. But 50 years later, in 2010, the collapse is brutal. There are no more than 56% who call themselves Catholic. The decline becomes abysmal when you look at only the 4.5% attending weekly Mass. So among those claiming to be Catholics, only an extreme minority actually are. The majority haven't forgotten the third of the 10 Commandments. The seventh day is a Sabbath of solemn rest, holy to the Lord. Exodus 31:15. And that the Lord, our Lord, when he instituted the Eucharist on the evening of the Last Supper, quote, take and drink all of you, for this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and everlasting covenant, which will be poured out for you and for the many for the forgiveness of sins. Eucharistic prayer, canon of the Mass. Some footnotes from Catholic Le Monde. I would strongly urge people to pick up a copy of the book if available, but it's
I don't have the footnotes in my the PDF that I have.
okay. Well, maybe we can get in touch with the publisher. But anyway, we'll just do a couple sections here. and ladies and gentlemen, this is harder than it sounds because you're reading an awful lot. It's rough on the voice. So I want to thank Patrick for taking up for me. Should we conclude the 56% of French, quote, Catholics who are only Catholic because of the cultural attachment to family tradition and that they do not know the true nature of the Christian faith? And how many true believers are there among the 76% of Europeans who profess to, quote, be Christian? Additionally, the impressive Christianity in the economics and law become more and more obviously effaced. Working on Sundays, homosexual parity of marriage, legalization of euthanasia, consecration of abortion as a fundamental right, trafficking of women's bodies through surrogate mothers, etc. So many evils from which the Catholic faith, formerly shared by the majority, shielded us. In addition, it is every bit as evident that the face of France is changing. According to demographers Michel Troubault and Jean-Paul Gornevich, 20% of the total population of foreign origin, 1 out of 5. Other European countries are experiencing the same phenomenon, such as Great Britain, where 80% of the demographic growth is due to non-European minorities. According to the geographer Laurent Challard, the West is the continent will look more and more like the United States, with major cities Paris, London, Brussels, Amsterdam, where minorities could become the majority in the midterm. This mutation of Western...
So, I can't remember the verse. I want to say it's in Deuteronomy 28 or something like that. I can look it up and we can talk about it on the page. We can talk about it eventually. But I think to give you a reprieve from talking for a second, God doesn't like the face of France is changing, the face of America is changing, the face of Europe is changing, because we don't worship God, because we don't have God centered in the public square.
That's absolutely correct.
And that this is more of a political issue than it is a spiritual issue.
So
that,
why Archbishop Lefebvre, God bless him, may he one day be raised to the elders he deserves and be declared a doctor of the church, as I believe he is. Let me look him up real quick. But he had a sister who was a sister, a mother superior.
A sister that was a mother superior.
Yes, one of his sisters was a mother superior. Marcel Lefebvre was born in Tours-Konig Nord. He was the second son and third child of 8 children of textile factory owner René Lefebvre and Gabrielle, born Wattinet, who died in 1938. So, of 8 children, right, 3 entered religious life. So he himself, I believe one of his brothers and one of his sisters, all became religious superiors. And I don't know about his nieces and nephews, but I assume that priests come from families, sisters religious come from families, and it is precisely because we do not have those families that we're being replaced. And in fact, Mr. Langella brings that up. This mutation of Western Europe has a name: the Great Replacement. Coined in 2011 by the essayist Renard Camus, the Great Replacement refers to the disappearance of the indigenous population in favor of massive foreigners within only 1 or 2 generations. Attacked by the thought police, Renard Camus was only citing the words of a recent report by the United Nations, which to him seemed to welcome the fact, quote, the decline of the population is inevitable without replacement migration, unquote. Dechristianization and Great Replacement go hand in hand. The migratory hurricane that is tossing the remains of Europe emptied of her energy by the denial of her baptism to the wind. And because nature has a horror in the vacuum, Christianity is replaced by an obsession with, quote, well-being, kind of like a westernized Buddhism, or else pseudo-Christian sects like the Jehovah's Witnesses. Islam, more militant than ever, and especially the cult of the god of consumerism. And the Identitarian awakening of Catholics of France. However, resistance forces are emerging in France and on the old continent. On one hand, militant Catholic faith no longer fears asserting itself in the street. The pro-marriage demonstrations, the French Spring vigils, and other masses, March for Life events, the Chartres pilgrimage, for example, it's another one he doesn't include, but it's very much evident. On the other hand, the Identitarian awakening of European peoples to want to remain masters of their own homes, the success of Front National and populist parties, the rise of rejection of immigrant Islam, the quest for roots and nostalgia for a homogeneous France. 30 years ago, in Domaine de la Chrétienté, Dom Gerard Calvet, founder of the monastery of Saint Madeleine du Barreau, identified the enemy with which the two forces have in common: the globalist heresy. This heresy wants to simultaneously eradicate the faith and dissolve the people into a constituent and a consumerist blob which neither color nor flavor. Can you say that this is not the agenda of the Vatican this particular time? I mean, we have an ostensible Pope who's saying that to reject the destruction of France is to be unchristian. I mean, the crisis.
Or with the how many bishops in the United States are bringing in Haitians and setting them up?
Well, yeah, a third of the USCC's budget is from the federal government.
A third. That's crazy. I didn't know it was a third.
That could be wrong. I mean, but it's a lot.
But still, yeah. But yeah, regardless, and it's yeah. Anyways.
Yeah.
Human community. Both cases of magnitude. A human community cannot live separate from its creator, from whom it receives all life, nor it can live without ethno-cultural homogeneity, a sine qua non for social peace and common well-being. That is why multicultural societies sinking ever more each day into violence are doomed to perish. Finally, a nation disappears. Simply put, when the people it embodies cease to exist, carried away by the hate for their God, and progressively replaced by foreign populations. Faced with the threat of seeing our Christian identity, the substance of France, overwhelmed by this wave, a Catholic counteroffensive must come up. Will this happen tomorrow? Perhaps. If you believe that the result of the first round of regional elections in 2015, 32% of Catholics voted for Front National, compared to the 27% of voters at the national level. As for regular practicing Catholics, between the departmental elections in March and the regional in December, the vote for the RN went up 9% to 24%.
9% to 24%. Among young voters in France, the French population, the majority voted for Marine Le Pen. In the face of this identitarian wave, quote, the Catholic dam collapses, according to the weekly Pèlerin. 2 years later, and between the last presidential elections, Le Monde reports the collapse of the Catholic anti-Front National dike, which great voices have participated in building here and there, is confirmed by the fact that some bishops are no longer elected to meet with elected officials from the Front National. At the same time, several clerics gathered under the banner of Antioche Group announced they would vote for Marine Le Pen in order to hinder the election of Macron, a candidate who was, quote, an ultra-liberal oligarch, globalist, transhumanist, technocratic, anti-family, pro-EU, and Euthanasia abortion supporter, and a suspected eugenicist, unquote. Marianne Marchal Le Pen, who played a big role here in 2013, lending these voters her support. 2 years later, she announced that she would withdraw grants to family planning if she were elected president of the Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur region. And at the end of 2016, she reiterated that defunding abortions of convenience is an integral part of the Front National program. Since then, Marianne Marchal Le Pen has retired from politics. There doesn't seem to be a massive Catholic vote in favor of her aunt, Marine Le Pen, but the anti-Identitarian trend is growing within the church, and the magazine Glorious is not mistaken when it reports, quote, this is anything but a flash in the pan. This is about a neoconservative Identitarian Catholicism whose representatives are young, active, and mobilized, unquote. The Identitarian awakening of French Catholics seems well on its way. Of course, this is 4 or 5 years old by now, and the book is even older than that. It was translated in 2020. But a significant chunk of the remaining Catholics in France are in fact traditionalists, because I looked up Archbishop Lefebvre's father, which is René Lefebvre. So it wasn't just the three of his 8 children, 2 became missionary priests, 3 girls enrolled in different religious congregations, and 3 others founded large Catholic families. So of his 8 children, 5 entered religious life, and
Four.
And
Yeah.
no, 5, 3
Okay.
3 girls and 2 sons. So like that's and probably he probably had at least 10 grandchildren if he had 3 large families. I don't know. But that's right. That's the France that was able to go forth and colonize the world. That's the France that was able to conquer all of Europe. Pardon me, under Napoleon.
Well, and that had priests and clergy that to replace the elderly, versus importing these new like third world or priests or third world clergy,
right?
Like what the Americans are doing now.
And nuns in schools and nuns in hospitals is the hospital can be free when all you have to pay for is the nun's food and board, right? Like they don't really require much of a salary. The school can be free or cheap when the sisters all working at the school don't really require much because they're sisters.
Oh yeah, I don't know how much you pay in healthcare, but like mine's a significant portion of my check.
Oh, it's absurd. Thousands of dollars a year, tens of thousands of dollars a year, probably when I figure it all out.
But yeah, no, to live in a world where it's like, okay, big Catholic families, things get cheaper.
Right.
Not necessarily. This is all material, but yeah.
Identitarian. Title of this book calls for some clarification. What exactly is an identitarian? The term identitarian has become a catch-all label. Political demagogues speak of, quote, identity downturn. Stigmatize the opportunities. Opponents raising goats qualifies as identitarian production in Photoshop by the political press. There's a new generation of identitarian priests. And then there's the identitarian movement in a broad sense, which brings together political movements throughout Europe. There is no there's no academic definition of the term because it does not correspond to any school of thought or specific doctrine. To be identitarian implies an awareness multicultural societies or multi-conflictual societies, and the homogeneity of a nation determines its survival. Politically, one can trace the concern for European identity back to the publication of the pro-European think tank GRECE, G-R-E-C-E, Groupement de Recherche des Études pour la Civilisation Européenne, founded in 1969 by Alain de Benoit and Dominique Venner, as well as the Club de Horloge, which published the book Les Racines du Futur, Roots of the Future in 1977. As a side note, I would highly recommend both Alain de Benoit and Dominique Venner. Their writing is outstanding.
Hopefully we get to them in the future.
Yeah.
I'm sure we'll have time.
Positive Critiques, a wonderful book. You can get that on Audible, I think. I think that's Dominique Venner. Anyway. The recurring use of the word developed thanks to the magazine Identité, published by the Scientific Council on the Front National in the early 1990s, and was sponsored by the people of different spiritual backgrounds, with Pierre Vitel rubbing shoulders with Jean Duverger, Bruno Roll-Snitch, Pierre Goriond, and Bernard Antony, co-founder of the Pilgrimage to Chartres. There was diversity even on the editing team, from Jean-Yves de Legalou to the Catholics Claude Pauline, Pierre de Meuse, and Claude Rousseau, all 3 academics. According to one of its signature slogans, the magazine, quote, defended, quote, the European and Christian identity of France, unquote. In 2000, Maitre Frédéric Pichon founded the think tank European Gentes, intended to reflect on the European construct around, quote, an original synthesis between certain reflections of the new right and an assumed Christian dimension, unquote. In 2012, a group of friends founded Academia Christiana, an association whose members seek to be, quote, Catholic and rooted, unquote. In August of 2016, their semi-university was organized on the theme of, quote, identity in the face of the new Tower of Babel. To the Identitarian is to reject the commercial standardization way of life at the global level, immigration throughout all non-European settlement, and the increasing Islamization of our streets. To be Identitarian is to want to remain oneself.
And isn't that? We're going to repeat that. To be Identitarian is to remain oneself. That kind of blew me away. It is like excuse me, how vile that is to the global religion to remain, to be like your father, to be like your grandfather, to be like your grandmother, to be like your mother. That is like the ultimate sin in this global
right.
Empire.
So, to bring up Archbishop Lefebvre again, just because right. Lefebvre was born in Tourcoing in Nord in northern France in 1879 from a family which gave almost 50 of its members to the church since 1738, including a cardinal, a few bishops, and many priests and religious. He was a devout Catholic who sought to bring his children to daily mass in 1923. He was advised two of his sons, Marcel and René, to begin studies for the priesthood at the French seminary in Rome, because the French seminary was liberal. Of his 8 children, 2 became missionary priests. 3 girls enrolled in different religious congregations, and the other 3 founded large families. René Lefebvre was a outspoken monarchist. He directed his spy ring for the British intelligence when Tourcoing was occupied with the Imperial German Army during World War I. So here's this man who's a patriot and a patriarch, and to be a Lefebvre in northern France was to be something, right? Like a cardinal and bishops and priests, and to have nephews that were priests and sons that were priests and cousins that were priests and uncles that were priests and family. Why would you not want, if you were a Lefebvre in Nord, why would you not be proud of that? Why shouldn't the people of Nord honor the Lefebvre family? You know, we can. During the Second World War, René Lefebvre occupied France. He resumed smuggling soldiers and escaped prisoners, and he was arrested and sentenced to death. He was sent to Sonneberg. He died, and his body's never been recovered. He was awarded the military medal for his. So he's a hero. I mean, we can disagree with, the French Republic's position in the Second World War or whatever, but this man, was brave, was faithful unto death for his country. Why shouldn't we wish to remain ourselves? Why shouldn't people from Nord be proud of the Lefebvre family? Why should everyone else be allowed into Nord who doesn't appreciate the Lefebvre family? I mean, what's wrong with it?
It's we have these cultural touchdowns of everybody, even like American heroes, like the like Washington's, or like these founding our folk heroes ourselves. I've got friends that like talk about they're great heroes in the Civil War. That they I mean, sure, we can discuss how terrible that was and how this, that, and the other, but it's like the blood ties one to the land and ties one to the future and the past, and that's why it needs to be bastardized, because once you bastardize one's blood, you cut yourself off from the land, and you just can rejoin the religion of consumerism.
Right. Yeah, I mean,
okay.
and I guess this book is available on Amazon still. I don't know. But let's go up to Catholicism is not a party because my voice is giving out. But
Oh,
go
okay,
ahead.
I can finish off if you'd like me to, sir.
Go right ahead, Patrick, please.
We were when I lost my location. It was I scrolled away. I am terrible.
But there's also, but there's also,
Sorry about
one
that.
could say, a wide missionary scope. To be identitarian is not only about chanting slogans, but it is also about embodying this identity through a healthy, rooted, coherent lifestyle to show daily, in little things as well as large, that we belong to a lineage, to a family larger than that which brought us into the world. Guillaume Lut, a former member of Action Francais who oversaw the Maxime Real des Sartres camp, president of the Front National Youth, founder of Identitarians in 2002, explained the Identitarian idea. Quote, instead of nationalism, the ideology of the nation, we prefer patriotism, a birth attachment to our land, a patriotism that we dare to affirm in a triple way: regional birth attachment, French historical homeland, and European civilizational homeland. Unquote.
And that is interesting that Patriot is that, versus our, we had just had the election, and it's like, are you really the GOP, the big GOP conference was about patriotism and like the bringing back of the like rah rah rah, this is America, red, white, and blue. But then you look around and it's like they earlier that year they had like a was it a Hindi celebration? How does this like Indian paganism attached to American patriotism?
Yeah.
And it's just that was just shocking to me. But I can continue if you have anything else.
Go ahead, please.
Even in the formula, managed to shock a few Pharisees who are concerned with more with the etiquette than with the idea. There was nothing revolutionary about it. With the national right, the epithet nationalist has never won over the general support, neither among Catholics like the Bretonists nor with the supporters of a European imperial power. So the debate is still open. What is important there is the condemnation of idolatry of the nation, a new golden calf to which some sacrifice everything. That is with the spirit of the Third Republic, which attacked the Catholic faith and regional identities in its desire to chop off any head that stuck out. This nationalism lit Europe on fire with was condemned by Pope Pius the 12th when the domineering quote when the domineering and centralizing state makes nationality the base of its power to expand, unquote. Then we have, quote, the nationalist state with a germ of rivalries and the source of discord, unquote. The Identitarian version conceives its identity much like a Russian doll in accordance with the social doctrine of the church and its guiding principles of substantiarity. That is, each part of a whole must enjoy the broadest possible autonomy. Thus, we can say that the Identitarian currently goes back to the regional awakening of the 19th century around Frederick Marcel and the Federalist thinking of the young, Frederick de Margus, I am terrible with my French, and Charles Maurras. To defend one's identity is hardly nostalgia for better times. It is about rehashing an ideal past, but it's not about rehashing an ideal past, but rather extracting from the past, which has made France so beautiful and can make her beautiful again. If we put forth the effort, if God grants us victory, to be identitarian is not about stirring the ashes, but transmuting the flame. As Gustave Thibon wrote, quote, we are not going back to what was, rather we climb towards the remains, unquote. For identitarians to be they members of a political movement or not, if the 12th century was one of ideologies, the 21st century is one of identities. Today, it is not only the sovereignty of nations that is at stake, but the very identity of the people. It is not only their political self-determination, but the very substance of nations that we must defend to limit political action to the reconquest of the national sovereignty and the like of putting a Band-Aid on a cancer patient. The sickness is far more profound than that it requires more energetic remedies. The identitarian struggle, therefore, is that of survival of men in their essential diversities alongside the resistance to the great genocide caused by mass abortion and euthanasia. The fight for identity is a vital priority. If the French disappear, then France dies. France without French, no matter how many times the Marseillaise is played on television, it is no longer France. Philip de Villers remarked, 200,000 abortions per year, 200,000 immigrants per year. Lives are removed and others are uprooted. Unquote. Globalism is a culture of death, and the identitarian struggle of a march for life, that is, the life of people as communities of destiny, loved by God in all of their aspects.
Well, that's a good stop here. We're partway through the
the
introduction here, and
I think it's once again more important to rehash that without this is not an ideology of hate. That this is not hating the other. This is loving ourselves, loving our blood, loving.
Well, can you love France?
Creating a future for our kids to exist.
Can you love France without wanting it to be French?
We're not trying to go back in time. We're trying to find out what it means to be an American, in our case, what it means to be a white American.
Not just a white American, but also to live in a world where the fullness of faith is expressed, as well as, the faith is not a suicide pact, to paraphrase Abraham Lincoln. And if the faith demands of us that we love a France that is not French, that we love an England that is not England, right? Can you say that you love France if there are no French people there? I don't know much about France, to be honest. I've never been there. It's unlikely that I'll go, but it seems to me that if you even love the idea of France, you must love the Notre Dame Cathedral, and you must love the churches of France and the saints of France and the culture of France and the eldest daughter of the Church of France. You must, if you love France at all, you must love King St. Louis IX, and you must love the Crusaders, and you must love the
Charlemagne and
Catholic France. You must love Catholic France if you're to love France at all. And we can disagree about the revolution with folks, but to not want French to be French and Catholic is to not love France. And I just can't take seriously anybody that would be indifferent to or celebrate the destruction of the French people and of Catholic France.
Yeah.
And we'll take this up, we'll be doing these, kind of on a short, digestible chunks basis, so that they're easy to follow and that it's not too difficult on our voices. And we'll do this, and then if you have other suggestions, please contact us. Patrick, can you please let the folks know?
Yeah, our email is FP fppodcastcontact@gmail.com. And then I still haven't made a Twitter yet, or X, whatever you want to call it. And that'll be posted on the channel, I'm sure, by the time these are up.
Yes, but we want to thank everyone for listening, and if you have suggestions or suggested guests, please let us know. with that, I'm going to close this in an Ave, and I want to thank Patrick for doing the lion's share of the work here. So thank you, Patrick. Till next time, this has been Fundamental Principle, and I'm Jerome. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria Mater Dei, ora pro nobis pectoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostrae. Amen.